The land office man had already uncapped his pen when Elias Boone heard horses on the Mesa road. He looked past the paper laid across the fence rail. Dust was rising beyond the red cut, too broad for one rider. Harland Pike turned first. The landman kept his finger on the line where Elias was supposed to surrender the East Spring lease. Then, 12 horses came around the bend. Elias stayed still. 3 days earlier, those horses had vanished during a hard wind that tore through the North Range. He had searched dry arroyos, broken washes, and the old freight trace until his bad shoulder burned. By dawn, he had accepted they were gone. Without the 12, there would be no territorial remount contract. Without that contract, he could not make the spring payment. So he had agreed to surrender the lease before Pike could take it. Now every horse was coming home. A woman rode behind them on a bay gelding dark with sweat. She kept the string moving without shouting. One horse drifted toward the ditch. She angled her gelding across its path, and the animal folded back into line. Elias counted twice. 12. Pike removed his hat. That complicates things. The woman drove the herd through the open gate. She looked near 40, lean from saddle work, wearing a faded brown coat against the morning cold. Nothing about her movement was hurried. She stopped near Elias. "Boone Ranch?" "Yes." "These yours?" "They are." "Then close that gate." He closed it. Only after the latch dropped did she dismount. "Where did you find them?" "West of the old relay trace. They'd split into 3 groups." Pike stepped closer. "You drove 12 loose horses across that country alone?" She looked at him. "No. I drove 4, then 5, then 3. I joined them after they settled." Elias went into the corral. 2 horses had shallow scrapes. 1 chestnut had lost a shoe. A dun carried dried mud to its belly. But all 12 were standing. All 12 were sound enough to work. Behind him, paper rustled. The landman cleared his throat. "Mr. Boone, do you still intend to sign?" Elias turned. The surrender paper lay on the rail. For years, he had made decisions before anyone could make them for him. That habit had kept Boone Ranch alive after a former partner left him with debt, angry suppliers, and an empty account. Elias picked up the paper. Pike watched him. "You still have 21 days, Pike said, "but returned horses aren't qualified remounts." "I know. My offer on the lease stands until noon." Elias tore the paper across the signature line. Pike put his hat back on. "That buys you time," he said, "not success." He walked away. The woman had returned to the horses. She stood near a nervous black gelding, watching him circle. "What's your name?" Elias asked. "Tess Rowan." "You headed somewhere?" "South." "That specific?" It was enough until this morning. Elias almost smiled. "You need breakfast." "I need water first. So does my horse." At the trough, Tess loosened the gelding's cinch before letting him drink. Elias noticed. In the kitchen, he fried bacon and warmed yesterday's biscuits. Tess looked through the window at the corral while she ate. "You know what Pike meant?" she asked. "Remount trial." "When?" 21 days. "These were your 12? "Yes." She kept watching them. "You think they can qualify?" Elias asked. "I think some can." That wasn't the question. "No." She set down her cup. "I haven't seen enough." Elias disliked the answer because it was careful. He trusted careful answers more than confident ones. After breakfast, Tess asked him to move each horse through the narrow sorting lane. The first sorrel went cleanly. The second balked at a hanging feed sack. The third rushed through. The fourth passed quietly. Behind him, the nervous black gelding stopped fighting the lead rope. Tess watched the black twice. "Send him through alone." Elias did. The gelding refused the lane. Tess brought the calm horse back. This time the black followed without touching the rails. Elias folded his arms. Coincidence? Maybe. She changed the order. A bay mare that had fought the gate alone walked through beside a roan. A chestnut stopped swinging its hindquarters when Tess placed the dun beside him. Tess said nothing. Finally, Elias asked, "What are you seeing?" "Your horses aren't 12 separate problems. They're 12 separate horses." "That's different. Every hour now had a price attached to it. What would you do?" Tess faced him. "Give me 21 days. Elias laughed once. "You just got here. I also brought back the horses you were about to surrender water over. That doesn't make you my trainer." "No, hiring me would." He studied her. "What are your terms?" "Daily wage. Meals, a bunk. I control conditioning. You control sales, ownership, and money. And if I disagree, you can fire me. That simple?" "It should be." Elias looked across the corral. Beyond the horses, clear spring water moved through the irrigation ditch toward the east pasture. 21 days. He could still sell part of the string. He could surrender the lease. Pike would pay well enough to keep the rest of Boone Ranch alive another year. Those choices made sense. Tess waited. Elias reached for the gate latch, found it secure, and tightened it anyway. Then he looked at her. 21 days, he said. "You run the training." Tess held his eyes. "Then don't take it back the first time you dislike my decision." "We'll see." "No," she said. "You will." She turned toward the 12 horses. Elias followed. For the first time in years, something valuable on Boone Ranch was about to depend on another person's judgment. By the 4th morning, Tess had stopped calling the horses by color. She called them by number. 12 small copper tags hung from nails beside the tack room door. Each had been punched by hand with a number from 1 to 12. Elias stood beside them with his coffee. "You planning to forget their names?" "No." "Then why numbers?" "Because names make people defend opinions." She lifted number 4 from its nail. "If I tell you Juniper works badly beside Clay, you already know which horse you like better. 4 and 9 don't care what you think." Elias looked at her. "You always this pleasant before sunrise?" "Usually worse." She walked toward the corral. By then, Tess had recorded every horse twice through the sorting lane, across the shallow wash, beside flapping canvas, and through the narrow gate between the hay shed and south fence. She timed recovery after short runs. She watched how quickly each horse returned to an easy breathing rhythm. More important, she kept changing which animal stood beside which. Elias thought it was too slow. The remount trial was 17 days away. "You can't spend a week making introductions," he said. Tess was tightening a lead rope. "I'm not. Looks like it. I'm finding out who makes who worse." "That's training. That's information." Elias stepped closer. "There's a difference?" "There will be if we get it wrong." She sent number 7 into the lane alone. The gelding rushed the final 6 feet and struck the rail with one hip. Tess brought number 2 beside him. They went again. Number 7 stayed straight. Elias watched without speaking. Tess marked something in her notebook. At noon, she told him they were going to the old stage road. Elias stopped sharpening a hoof knife. "There's nothing out there." "There's a tunnel." "There's half a tunnel." Good enough. The old relay road had been abandoned years earlier, when a newer freight route opened farther east. Its tunnel cut through a low shoulder of red stone, less than 3 miles from the ranch. The passage was short, perhaps 70 feet, but narrow enough that horses disliked entering it after open country. A patch of corrugated metal had once been fixed above the western mouth. Most of it was gone. One loose section remained. When the wind moved across the mesa, the metal lifted and dropped against the stone. Clack. Silence. Clack. Tess stood outside the entrance and listened. "That'll do." Elias looked into the dark opening. "For what?" "To find out whether you've got 12 remount horses or 12 pasture horses." The first gelding entered alone. Halfway in, the metal struck the rock. The horse spun. Elias caught the lead and pulled him straight. Again. They tried twice more. The gelding pushed farther each time, but never passed cleanly. A mare did worse. A chestnut stopped at the entrance and planted his feet. Elias worked him for 10 minutes. The horse backed away. We're burning daylight, Elias said. Tess nodded. Yes. Then do something. I am. You're watching. That's something. He stared at her. She ignored him. Tess brought number 3 from the picket line and placed him beside the chestnut. Together, Elias shook his head. The trial won't let them hide behind another horse. They aren't hiding. What would you call it? Reading. She handed him one lead. They walked the pair toward the tunnel. The chestnut hesitated. Number 3 kept moving. One step, then another. The chestnut followed. The loose metal struck. Both animals raised their heads. Number 3 continued. The chestnut stayed with him. They emerged into sunlight at the far end. Tess checked her watch. Elias looked back through the tunnel. Again, he said. The second pass was cleaner. By sunset, 2 pairs could cross without breaking stride. 3 horses still refused to go cleanly alone. On the ride home, Elias said, "The qualification is individual." Parts of it. So they still have to work alone. Yes. Then why teach dependence? Tess kept her eyes on the road. I'm teaching them not to spend all their strength fighting pressure. They need confidence. They need judgment. Horses don't reason like people. I didn't say they did. Elias rode another 20 yards. You're changing the whole system. I'm trying to. That answer followed him into supper. The next morning, Elias took numbers 5 and 8 out before Tess came from the bunk room. He ran them separately through the wash and along the south fence. Both worked well, so he kept them apart. When Tess arrived, she saw the altered training board. You changed the pairings. I tested something. You changed them. They're my horses. Tess removed her gloves. Yes, nothing more. That bothered him worse than an argument. She worked the remaining horses until noon. Then she carried the board into the tack room and leaned it against the wall. What are you doing? Elias asked. You run today. I thought I hired you. You hired me to be responsible for the result. You are. No, you want me responsible for your decisions. Elias stepped into the doorway. I know these horses. I know. I've trained remount stock before. I know that too. Then maybe listen. Tess faced him. I have, every day. Her voice stayed level. You train these horses to solve every problem alone. Most of them can. 3 can't yet. 2 others waste themselves trying. That matters when somebody asks them for another mile after the hard part. Elias looked toward the corral. Number 7 stood beside number 2. The gelding's head was low, quiet. Tess picked up her gloves. If you want your system, use it. But don't call it mine when trial day comes. She walked away. Elias stayed in the doorway. For the rest of the afternoon, he trained alone. By sunset, number 5 had improved. Number 8 had not. The chestnut refused the tunnel twice. On the 3rd attempt, Elias pushed harder. The horse came through, but sweating heavily. Too heavily for the work. Elias stood beside him afterward and watched his sides move. Fast, then faster. Tess had been right about that much. The next morning she found Elias waiting beside the copper tags. The training board rested against the wall. He held it out. Which pair first? Tess looked at him. No smile. No victory. 3 and 11. Elias handed her the board. From that morning, they stopped dividing the work. The improvement was not dramatic. It was measurable. 4 pairs crossed the tunnel cleanly by the 10th day. 5 by the 11th. The 6th still lost time at the western entrance. Tess adjusted them again. Elias let her. That afternoon, a freight wagon stopped at Boone Ranch carrying only 6 bales of hay. Elias walked out to meet the driver. I ordered 18. That's all I could get. Why? Pike bought most of the south shipment. Elias looked at the wagon. When? Yesterday. How much is left in town? Enough if you pay town price. Town price was nearly double. Elias said nothing. He unloaded the 6 bales himself. That evening he rode to the feed yard and returned after dark. Tess was waiting beside the corral. How bad? He dismounted. Bad enough. He had bought what they needed. Nothing more. Every dollar he had kept aside for the East Spring lease was now tied up in hay, trial fees, and 21 days of keeping 12 horses ready. Tess studied him. You paid for the feed. Yes. And the lease? Elias looked toward the dark line of the east pasture. If these horses don't qualify, there won't be a lease. For the first time, the trial was no longer a chance to save Boone Ranch. It was the only chance left. By the 15th day, the copper tags had stopped moving. Tess had found her 6 pairs. Number 3 steadied 11. 2 kept 7 from rushing. The roan mare beside 9 could cross the tunnel without touching either wall, and number 5 had finally stopped fighting the echo of his own hooves. Elias watched the last pair emerge into sunlight. Tess checked the time. Again. He expected her to say they were ready. She never did. That was one reason he had started trusting her. They ran the pair once more. This time, the loose sheet of metal snapped harder above the entrance. Both horses lifted their heads. Neither stopped. Tess lowered her watch. Better. Elias leaned against the stone. That almost sounded like praise. Don't get spoiled. They walked the horses back toward the ranch beneath a pale morning sky. For the first time since Tess arrived, Elias thought they might actually make it. That thought lasted until Harland Pike rode into the yard after noon. Pike came alone. No land representative, no ranch hands. He tied his horse beside the water trough and spent several minutes looking at the 12 animals before saying why he was there. Elias waited. Pike walked around number 3 first. Then number 7. Then the roan mare. He never discussed a price until he had seen what he was buying from every side. Finally he stopped. I'll buy 4. Elias folded his arms. They're not for sale. Everything with a feed bill is for sale. Tess was working near the far rail. She heard him, but kept brushing dust from number 11's back. Pike named a price. Elias looked at him. The amount would cover the East Spring lease. It would also leave enough for winter grain. No trial needed. No gamble. No 21-day deadline. Pike saw that Elias understood. 4 horses, Pike said. You keep 8, keep your pasture, and quit betting a ranch on one contract. The remount trial requires 12. I know. Elias looked toward the pasture. Clear water moved through the ditch. He could hear it even from the corral. Pike followed his eyes. I'm not asking you to like the offer. No, I'm asking you to count. Elias nearly laughed at that. He had been counting for years. Feed sacks, shoes, fence posts, contract payments. Every mistake had a number. So did every safe decision. When do you need an answer? Before sundown. Pike mounted. I'll be at the relay house. He tipped his hat toward Tess. Then he rode out. Elias stayed beside the gate. Tess continued brushing the horse. You heard him. Yes. What do you think? She set the brush down. They're your horses. I asked what you think, and I answered. Elias stepped closer. I hired you to prepare them. You did. So tell me if 4 are worth selling. Tess faced him. If you sell them, your water lease is safe, and the contract is gone. Yes. You've spent 15 days on this. I was paid for 15 days. That's all it means to you? Her eyes hardened. No, but I'm not making this choice so you can hand me part of the blame later. Elias went still. Tess did not raise her voice. You want me to tell you what to do because then, if it fails, you can say you trusted the wrong person. That isn't fair. It's exact. He turned away. The old anger came quickly. Not at Tess, at memory. 7 years earlier, Elias had signed for a large cavalry order with another man's promise beside his own. Cal Mercer had handled the buyer. Elias had handled the horses. When the first advance came, Mercer disappeared with most of it. Elias still had to deliver. He sold breeding stock to finish the contract and spent 3 years paying what remained. Since then, every important choice at Boone Ranch passed through one pair of hands. His. Tess leaned against the rail. What happened? Elias looked at her. She had never asked about the old habit. Never asked why he checked gates twice or changed decisions after giving them away. So he told her. Not everything. Enough. When he finished, Tess looked toward the 12 horses. I understand why you do it. Good. That doesn't make it useful. Elias gave a dry laugh. What would? Nothing. He frowned. Tess continued. There is no version of trust where another person cannot disappoint you. He said nothing. If you need certainty, she said, keep doing everything alone. She picked up the brush. But don't call that trust. The sun moved lower. Pike's offer waited 3 miles away. Elias walked the east pasture alone. He checked the ditch head gate. He inspected fence wire that did not need inspection. He tightened a hinge bolt already tight. At the far end, the spring grass had begun showing green beneath winter brown. 4 horses. That was the safe answer. He could keep the land. Keep 8 good animals. Start again. He had started again before. Then he looked toward the ranch. Tess was leading numbers 3 and 11 into the training lane. She had not stopped working while he decided. That mattered. At sunset, Elias saddled his horse. Tess said nothing. He rode to the relay house. Pike was outside. You came? Yes. Pike waited. Elias looked at him. No sale. Pike studied his face. Then I hope they pass. There was no mockery in it. That somehow made the decision heavier. So do I. Elias rode home in darkness. Tess was at the tack room table, writing times beside the copper numbers. He removed his gloves. I kept them. She nodded once. No congratulations. No reassurance. Just acceptance. The next morning, Elias found her before sunrise. He carried the training board. You choose the trial order. Tess looked up. All of it? All of it. She studied him long enough to make sure he meant it. Then she took the board. Their final tunnel run began at first light. 6 pairs. 6 clean crossings. The last pair entered beneath another hard snap of metal and came through without breaking stride. Tess stopped the watch. That's enough. For once, Elias did not ask for another run. They loaded gear before dawn the following morning and started toward the territorial relay station. The 12 horses moved in 6 quiet pairs behind them. By the time they reached the ridge, telegraph wire was catching the first orange light. Then the relay buildings appeared below. Pike's remount string was already tied along the eastern rail. Elias looked at Tess. Your order. She touched the copper tags hanging from her saddle. My order. They rode down together. At the trial gate, the examiner opened his book. Elias handed him Boone Ranch's entry. Then he pointed toward Tess. She decides which pair goes first. The gate swung open. The examiner called for the first pair just after sunrise. Tess sent numbers 3 and 11. Elias stood outside the rail, with his hat in one hand, while the horses were checked for soundness, handled by strangers, mounted, turned, and sent through a short controlled run. Neither animal fought the bit, neither crowded the other. The examiner marked his book. No praise, no warning. Next pair. Tess did not look at Elias. She was already bringing 2 and 7 forward. That was how the morning went. 1 pair at a time. Noise test, mounting test, short run, recovery, handling. Pike's horses worked from the eastern rail, while Boone's moved from the west. Pike had brought good stock. Elias knew enough to admit it. His riders were experienced, and his horses had seen more stations than Elias's young string had. This was not going to be won because Pike failed. It would be won only if Boone's 12 held together. By mid-morning, 4 pairs had passed the first sections. Number 5 had taken too long to settle after the run, but not long enough to fail. Tess watched him breathe. Elias watched Tess. She waited for 2 full cycles before saying, He's ready. The examiner nodded toward the stage road. Tunnel section. That was the part Elias had been waiting for. The old relay tunnel lay beyond a low rise behind the station. The trial required each assigned pair to enter from the western side, pass through under control, and emerge without bolting into the open ground beyond. Tess touched the first 2 copper tags. 3 and 11. They went cleanly. The metal above the entrance clicked once in the wind. Neither horse broke stride. 2 and 7 followed. Then 4 and 9. The 4th pair slowed inside but kept moving. The examiner made another mark. Elias finally let himself look at the remaining 4 horses. 5 and 8. 1 and 12. Tess sent 5 and 8 first. They entered shoulder to shoulder. Halfway through, a stronger gust crossed the mesa. The loose metal slammed hard against stone. Number 8 stopped. Elias moved before he thought. 1 step toward the tunnel. His hand lifted. For years, that was how he had solved trouble. Get closer, take hold, force the uncertain thing back into line before somebody else could make the wrong decision. Tess did not move. Wait, she said. Elias stopped. Inside the tunnel, number 8 shifted backward half a step. Number 5 turned his head. The movement was small. Just enough. Number 8 looked toward him. 5 stepped forward. 8 followed. No rope snapped tight. No handler dragged them through. The 2 horses walked out into daylight together. Elias lowered his hand. Tess looked at him once. Nothing needed saying. The last pair passed without trouble. The examiner closed his book. All 12 moved to recovery. Elias exhaled through his nose. They were not finished. The horses stood in the station yard, while pulse and breathing were checked again. Tack came off. Hooves were examined. Each animal had to stand for a stranger and accept handling without striking, pulling away, or fighting the rope. Pike stood across the yard with his arms folded. One of his riders gave him a quiet report. Pike nodded. His string had done well too. At last, the examiner called both men forward. Pike. Harlan stepped up. Boone. Elias joined him. The examiner turned a page. Both strings meet minimum standard. Pike glanced toward Elias. The examiner continued. The relay office needs 1 complete 12-horse lot delivered under 1 rate schedule. Pike can supply 8 this month without pulling horses from 2 existing stations. Pike's mouth tightened slightly. Boone can supply 12. Elias looked toward Tess. She was standing beside number 7, rubbing dried sweat from the gelding's neck. The examiner held out his hand. Boone Ranch gets the contract. Elias shook it. You've built a useful string. We did. The examiner looked at him. Elias pointed across the yard. Tess Rowan trained the pair system. Put her name beside mine. Tess stopped rubbing the horse. The examiner looked from Elias to her. Then he opened the book again. All right. Pike heard it. So did every relay worker within 20 feet. Elias did not care who heard. Pike came over after the papers were signed. You kept the 4. Yes. Cost me the pasture. You still have your other contracts. I do. Pike looked toward the horses. Good animals. They are. Pike gave Tess a short nod. Good work. Then he mounted and left. No threat followed him down the road. The contract advance reached the land office that afternoon. Elias paid the East Spring lease before sundown. 3 days later, he and Tess sat at the tack room table with a new agreement between them. Not marriage, not wages. An operating partnership. Equal authority over the horse business. Shared profit. Shared decisions. Clear terms for either one to leave. Tess read every line. You had help writing this? The land clerk. Good. She read it again. Then she signed. Elias signed beneath her name. He sat back. That settles the business. Yes. He looked at her. There's another question. I thought there might be. I'd like to court you. Tess folded the agreement once. You asking because I saved your ranch? No. Because I trained your horses? No. Good. She set the paper down. Then yes. Nothing more was needed that day. Near sunset, they opened the east pasture gate. The 12 qualified horses moved through in pairs at first, then spread into the grass as the spring water ran bright along the ditch. Elias closed one side of the gate. Tess closed the other. She removed the 12 copper training tags from her saddlebag and hung them in 2 straight rows on the rail. Beside the 12 filled hooks was one unused hook. Elias looked at it. For what? Tess watched the horses moving across the pasture. The next one. Elias rested his hand on the gate. Together they stood there until the 12 horses reached the far water. If you enjoy Western stories where trust is earned through action, subscribe and leave a like for the next ride.